Hi, I'm Cheryl Jackson. In 1989, the House of Commons passed a resolution to end child poverty in Canada by the year 2000. 21 years later, the rate has dropped a couple of percentage points. Here are some figures from Statistics Canada. In 1989, 11.9% of Canadian children lived in poverty. That figure represents 792,000 children. In 2007, 9.5% of children in Canada lived in poverty. That's nearly 1 in 10 children, and that figure represents 637,000 kids. 1 in 4 children in First Nations communities in Canada lives in poverty. For Aboriginal kids under the age of 6, that figure is almost double. 49% are living in poverty. And 40% of low-income children live in families where at least one parent works full-time year-round. So it's clear there are still too many poor children in our relatively rich country. Why have we not been able to make a significant reduction in the child poverty rate? What is life like for children and families who live in poverty? And what do we need to help bring people out of poverty for good? I'm joined by 4 people intimately involved with this issue. Peter Clutterbuck is the Research and Community Planning Coordinator at the Social Planning Network of Ontario. Teresa Schrader is a single parent living in poverty in Toronto. Brigitte Kitchen is a senior scholar in the School of Social Work at York University. She has researched child and family poverty for nearly 30 years. And joining us via webcam from Halifax, Nova Scotia is Nance Ackerman. She's the writer and director of the film 4 Feet Up. If you're watching us on television, we'll be here for a few more minutes, then the discussion will continue online only. So please make your way to tvo.org, where you can watch this show, participate in a live chat, and you can send your questions to our panel. You'll see the question box below this video. If you'd like to phone us, you can call our toll-free number at 1-888-891-1195. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Now, we're going to get to the statistics in a minute, but first I'd like to find out, Peter, what did you think of the film 4 Feet Up?
Well, I was obviously quite touched by the experience of the family. I think if you're not familiar with these stories, and of course in my work I get to hear a lot of these stories, it must be quite illuminating to people not familiar with what it means to live on low income, about what people have to struggle through. So I thought it was a good portrayal of a particular situation that can kind of represent many other people.
All right, Teresa, what did you think?
When I watched the film, I was a bit emotional. I'm from Nova Scotia, and I've gotten to see families like this firsthand, including my own family. We lived in poverty for most of my adolescent years after my father died, so it was really touching for me to see this once again.
Brigitte?
I also found the film very, very emotional because it reminded me when I was a children's aid worker in Vancouver, and what bothered me then was that the faces I saw in front of me changed, but the stories were very similar. And here we are 40 years later, and the situation hasn't changed one little bit.
All right. Nance, let's talk to you for a minute. Now, beautiful film, by the way, beautifully told story. Now, you told the story from the point of view of Isaiah, who's 8 years old when you're filming, and he's 4 feet tall, or 4 feet up, hence the title of the film. Why did you want to tell the story from his point of view?
I just felt in order to portray something to reach people, to connect people, it had to be done through his eyes and not through the eyes of experts or social workers. I think it just, I wanted it to be a visceral reaction.
All right. What difference do you think it makes to the audience to be able to hear Isaiah talk about what it's like?
Well, I think my goal here is to connect people. And I think when you hear a child talk, whether you're a mother or a grandmother or a father, an uncle, I think you immediately connect. I mean, all children, it's universal. So I think that's the value in his voice in the film.
All right. Teresa, now you do live in poverty in Toronto, and you're a single mom. How did you relate to the story in this film?
I struggle on a daily basis, I'm not going to lie. I spent a couple of years on social assistance with my son, and now I have a student loan and I'm going to George Brown College. Things are a lot better on student loan, but now faced with no summer job, I'm going to have to apply for social assistance later on this week. It's a desperate state of mind, body, and soul. You spend your days and your nights worrying about how you're going to make ends meet, and it's stressful. It doesn't give you a chance to, you know, move forward in life. You just feel kind of stuck.
It sounds like that's your job, is just trying to move forward.
It is a full-time job.
Right. Now, Peter, our government promised to end child poverty by the year 2000. Mm-hmm. There's no end in sight as far as we can see. Why not?
Well, I think that really it's been shown that when the economy is good, people do better. But a lot has changed around the labor market now and the kind of jobs that people can get and what they can pay. And when the economy isn't doing so well, we need better supports for people to be able to get through those periods of time. And not only have we found a change in the kind of work that people can get, and what they can get paid for it, and the benefits they can get to support families, we also found a lot of the social programs that supported people through the harder times, like social assistance, like employment insurance. All of these had changes to them over the last 2 decades that have really severely undermined the social safety net. So that people, when they fall into poverty, are falling deeper now, and we have a harder road to hoe to get out of it.
All right, we have an email here from Tony in Toronto. With today's economic structure, isn't poverty inevitable? With the deterioration of the middle class, either you're born privileged in upper class or you're forced to be lower class, essentially struggling on the verge of poverty. Brigitte, is that true? Are you born into it? Is it inevitable?
Well, you're not born into it. Also, there is a quip by George Bernard Shaw who once said, the most important decision we make in life is the choice of our parents. But we hope that this is really not true, because don't Canadians believe in equality of opportunity, and aren't we a country that claims that we offer opportunities? But you know what this person who made the comment is really right about is that we have a very strange kind of market system right now. I mean, we used to control market forces much more closely, much more tightly, but you know, now with this neoliberal climate, it seems we have a sort of dog-eat-dog kind of market economy. And so the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is shrinking. And you know, everybody is suffering with the exception of maybe the top 10%. And that is really a pretty intolerable situation for the vast majority of people.
All right.
I think one of the things about what's been changing with the market economy now and creating this division, I think the person who wrote in is quite perceptive to notice that we're creating a polarized society. And one research is showing now that, in fact, the more unequal we become, it's not just a cost on the people who are the poorest, but it costs the broader community health, and it affects everybody in the community. So the more unequal we become less healthy overall as a society, and we have more difficulties overall as a society. So it's a shared stake we all have in making sure that we don't get too distant from each other. And I think those people who couldn't really identify with this family because they've never seen a situation like that before, one of the advantages is we got to get closer to people like that and bring people closer to ourselves.
Okay, now I guess the most recent statistics show that right now about 1 in 10 children in Canada lives in poverty. In the mid-90s, that was actually higher. It was about 1 in 6 children. Yeah. Why did it get worse at that time? How could that have happened?
About 1.3 million at one time in Canada in about 95 or 96. We had a recession, of course. We had certain things happen. For example, in Ontario here, we had a 22% rate cut in the social assistance for people who are on welfare. People like Teresa essentially had their rates reduced by 22%. We've never recovered, actually, since 1995 in Ontario. We haven't had a real rate increase at all. There's no increase in the real income of people on social assistance. Cost of living adjustments along the way of 1 or 2%. But in fact, people are living now in 2010 in Ontario on the same social assistance rates that Mr. Harris established in 1995.
Hasn't changed?
Not in terms of real income, it hasn't.
Okay, well, what has changed then to bring the rates up to about 1 in 10?
Well,
some things must have
Yeah.
improved.
Well, the economy recovered.
Yeah.
Right, the economy has, well, recently not so much, but
No, but you see, we don't have the latest figures. You just wait, you know, because the statistics are always 2 years
That's
behind.
right. I think
so
they're
we're now dealing
2007.
with 2007. So we had, you know, what some people say is the most serious economic financial recession since the Great Depression, and you know, the figures aren't in yet. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if the child poverty rate just goes through the roof again.
all right, so you're expecting them to go up. I have to stop you there for just a minute. We'll carry on because we are just about to leave your TV screens. But the panel is going to stay to continue the conversation online. If you want to hear more about child poverty in Canada, just go to tvo.org. There you will find this discussion. We have a live chat and a place to submit your questions and your comments to our panel. So we will see you online at tvo.org. All right, Peter, we were talking about what might happen to the rates of child poverty in Canada given the recent recession.
Right, well, and I think that obviously, especially in communities that have lost so many jobs, as we have in Ontario here, we're more likely to see increased rates, although there are some measures that have been taken by the provincial government around trying to deal with children in poverty and working poor families with the Ontario Child Benefit. That's definitely would be helpful in that case. But we really don't know the full impact of the recession in terms of how it will affect that target. The other thing in terms of overall in Canada, there have been a number of provinces, including Ontario, make a commitment to try to reduce child and family poverty. Quebec, Newfoundland, and they have done some significant things since the early 2000s to actually reduce their child poverty numbers significantly, and that contributed to the lower rate. Not so much in Ontario as in some of these other provinces. Ontario has now made a commitment to reducing by 90,000 over the next 5 years child poverty rates.
Okay, we have a phone call now from Ronnie in Paris, Ontario. Hi, Ronnie.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry I've lost you on the television, but
we can hear you.
Still. Great. Okay. I very much appreciated that the film and your discussion is including what I call the working poor. Because I am a worker, but I know I'm in the like either just above the poverty line or thereabouts. But recently, with grown children, I become a single parent, and I've lived for 5 years in rent-assist housing. You know, so it's a shock to the system. But now my children, I've been able to help through university. So here we're hoping for, you know, a step up and everything to be better for them. But we are owing $32,000 to OSAP now. So it's, you know, it's just a never-ending cycle, even though, you know I'm doing everything right. So that's my comment.
Okay. Any response to that comment? It sounds like she's working hard. Teresa, you're nodding.
Yeah. I know that when I'm done school, I'm going to spend many, many years paying back my OSAP debt. And it will probably be a struggle. But this is the only chance I have. I have a 3-year-old son, and I do not want him to see poverty like I saw, particularly in my adolescent years. I don't want to have my son watch me be stressed out because we have no money, like I watched my mother. Like, I'm really trying to break this cycle of poverty, and it's hard to go in debt to do that. And I wish there was more money for post-secondary education, but it's a chance I'm going to take because my little boy is worth it. But it's hard. It's hard to know what I'm up against in the years to come.
What led you, Teresa, to the point you're at now?
To the point I'm at now?
Mm-hmm.
Just really sick and tired of living the way I was living. I guess that's the best way. I have a lot of life experience, you can call it. After living several years in poverty with my mother, and this was after my father died when I was 13. My mother and I had a toxic relationship that spiraled into me becoming a drug addict. And I was a drug addict for a decade on the streets of Toronto, and I decided that I didn't want to live like that anymore, and I've been fighting for 4 years to put the pieces together in my life. And now I have a beautiful son that I'm not going to let him see the realm of poverty. That is my hope.
All right. So how do you survive then? How do you pay for, you know, your rent, your food?
Right now, I have what I call the perfect intersection, or the perfect combination of things that are working in my life. I have rent geared to income, which it's huge. It plays a huge role in my life, because I remember when we used to have to take our food money and pay the rent with it when I was on social assistance. So I know the difference between having to take your food money and now not having to. It's still not enough to make ends meet, but it's a lot better than it was. And then subsidized childcare. If I didn't have those two things, I would not be where I am.
Right. And do you have to use food banks or other drop-ins?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
All right.
Particularly food banks, not so much drop-ins. But like I said earlier, OSAP is a lot better income than social assistance. And now I'm being faced with not having any summertime employment. So, you know, food banks are going to be a new way of life again this summer.
Okay. We have a call from Salim in Belleville. Hi, Salim.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. I can't hear you very well, Salim. Maybe we can turn that up a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Can we hear? Yes, I think that's good. Thanks, Salim. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is that your program is wonderful, and whatever it showed was great, but everyone talks about this side of the thing. I think we should start questioning the fact that we are living in the second largest country of the world. It's mineral rich, its natural resources are so high that no other country has it. The economy went down because of the sheer fact that all the money went to the business sector, and with the rest of the sector there was nothing left, so there was no buying power, and everything collapsed under its own weight. Talking about this, when it comes to poor people and needy people and people who are really sidelined, they start counting their pennies. And the benefits that are paid are just to keep the person alive and to promote depression and anxiety in the person, because the benefit paid are so low that by the second week of the month they start counting days and the pennies, whether it will reach the end of the month.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that comment. Peter, do you have any response to that? I think he sees some inequalities in the way we operate.
Well, I think that's definitely the case. It's not only the way that Canada operates, but there's been some real recent research that shows that a whole range of countries that have high policies that create greater inequalities do a lot worse economically and socially. And I think we are really driving a larger gap between the richer and the poor. And we have in Ontario about 10%, 11% kids in poverty. About 5.8% of those are kids in deep poverty, right? We really do need...
what does that mean, deep poverty?
That means they're living at what's called the low-income measure, 40%. In other words, there's a median income for all family populations. What the median income is, they're living at 40%
of that?
Below, yeah, of that. And so below, 40% of that. So that's about the bottom quartile or so, even less of the population.
Well, can we spend just a minute talking about how we measure poverty then? Because we've been using that word all evening, and I'm not sure we all understand exactly what that means. Can you, when we say a family or a child is living in poverty, how is that measured?
Yeah. Well, there are several different measures, and Brigitte's one better to talk about: the low-income cutoff, the low-income measure, and the market basket measure. And the low-income cutoff really hasn't been updated since 1993. It essentially means that a family is paying about 20% more than another family its size for the basic necessities of life. So
20% more of their income.
Of their income than the average family.
More than the average family spends. Yeah. And you see, officially we don't have a poverty line, and that's why we have the disputes. Now, in Britain, they take the poverty line is their social assistance rate, their supplementary benefit. And so you can imagine how low that is. The European Union uses 40% of median income. So 50% above, 50% below. So it's if your income is 40% of the 50 of the lower.
I'm getting
50.
confused, but essentially it's all relative then.
It's
all relative to what everybody else around you is earning and spending.
Yeah, but you see, what is not relative is that what we also saw in the film, that people actually go hungry. And I think, you see, that is something that the average Canadian has a really hard time to get their mind around. They will not believe that in this country people actually go hungry. And I thought the film made this point so beautifully when you see the apple orchards and this beautiful scene, and the comment in the film that this food is taken away for export. So it's the apples are commodity; they're sold. And the children around there don't have a chance to eat the apples, consume the apples. And that, I think, is really tragic. Then we had the mother who said she was hungry for 3 weeks. She had to be hospitalized.
Right.
And we heard about her kidney disease. I mean, surely, people are aware that poverty, malnutrition or going hungry causes problems with the kidneys.
Sure.
So we actually generating health problems, and then we yell that our healthcare costs are going up.
Right. Okay. We have a email here from Michael in Toronto. Though you rightly highlighted the disproportionate experience of poverty of First Nations people in Ontario, the parallel fact is that other racialized groups, diverse peoples of color, similarly experience poverty rates that are higher. Why does this color divide exist? Who would like to tackle that question? That's a good one.
Yeah, really the really depressing thing about those rates are that these are people coming to our country who are often more highly educated than ourselves.
Yes.
In other words, they're coming here with high expectations of being able to get work and support their families. And in fact, they come with frequently very high education levels. And they are high users of food banks because they can't get good jobs. And I think we do have to look at immigration policy that properly provides support to people when they come to the country in terms of properly settling and getting access to jobs and stable housing, and gives them the opportunity to use the skills and learning that they got in their homeland when they got their educations. I think there's an element of racism perhaps around the hiring of people, and but there's certainly a lot more that could be done to support them to integrate properly.
All right, Nance, we actually often think of poverty in terms of urban settings, like big cities like Toronto. You actually chose a family to profile in rural Nova Scotia. Why did you do that?
Well, actually, when I was talking to the producer and she said we need to do this story, I said, well, actually, I could roll out of bed and shoot my own kids. I live pretty darn close to the poverty line as an independent filmmaker. But the thing is, where I live, it's so ironic that it is one of the most beautiful places on earth. The food is literally falling off the trees. And people can't access that food. They can't afford organic food. They can't afford fresh food. If you heard in the food bank scene, she was offering her, canned fish, canned fruit, canned this. It gets exported out, canned, sent back, and this is where these kids are eating from the food banks. It just, the irony of it so close to home was, kind of irresistible as a storyteller. As well, I had a relationship with Debbie Reamer, the social worker. And when I asked her if she knew of one child that could portray this sort of irony in Canada and how someone so intelligent and magical, whose future might be a lot darker than it should be, she started crying and said it has to be Isaiah. So the whole thing was just put right in front of me,
All right. Nance, do you think there's a difference in the kinds of poverty that people experience in rural areas and urban areas?
Well, I was going to mention that, we talk socioeconomics, we talk, statistics and economies and urban poverty, but I think the thing about geography and the thing about stereotyping, we've we've got situations that geography present for a person, and I'm sure Teresa can probably talk to this too if she lived out here. A lot of people ask me in the film, you know, why didn't you take her to the pool so, you know, she could watch? And it was like, okay, sure, it's 10, 15 kilometers away to the pool. She doesn't have a car seat because she doesn't have a car. She has another small child on top of it. So who was going to take care of that child? She doesn't have childcare. The bus system here is impossible. Public transit, the issue of public transit in rural areas in Nova Scotia is a hot, you know, topic here because it's useless. It takes you an entire day to go to the dentist. You have to take a day off of work. It's expensive because you're stuck with your small kids sitting and waiting, and so you have to take them to McDonald's or take them to Tim Hortons. It is things that people don't even think about. You know?
All right. We have an email here from Pat in Toronto. Why are the families in poverty always having child after child and then asking how they are going to afford to feed and take care of them? I have 2 children by choice. Those are the limits of my means.
I'd like to
maybe
answer that one, actually, yeah.
Yes, why don't you go ahead, thanks.
Well, and I'd love to hear what other people have to say
Sure.
on the panel, but this gets brought up a lot. I think you have to listen pretty closely because I think Jen says it kind of softly in the mother says it softly in the film. But 3 of those children were conceived on birth control. She went at the age of 24 to try to get a tubal ligation, to get her tubes tied, and she was refused and told, forget it. That brings up to me a whole nother issue. She was not being irresponsible. She was trying, she was doing her best. I think we all know that birth control is you know, risky. Mm-hmm. And she was trying to solve the problem knowing that she couldn't afford this and was, you know, told to leave the doctor's office. And if I had gone in at the age of 25 or Brigitte or someone had gone in, I don't think we would have been turned away. I think the stereotyping and the judgment that is passed on people, you know, just for their superficial, the things that they walk in with, whether they have bad teeth or their kids don't have great clothes or, you know, they're wearing sweatpants that are way too short. They are judged and they are treated that way. So this was not, you know, on purpose, and that has to be noted.
All right, thank you. Brigitte, go ahead.
There's also a whole other aspect to it because birth control is expensive.
Yeah.
And well, it is.
Yes.
And so for a lot of people, you know, that's an additional cost they cannot really afford. But I always thought the question of whether these whether children should have been born is totally irrelevant. They're here. You can't just say, well, you know, too bad. You know, your parents shouldn't have had you.
Right.
I mean, are we going to punish the children for, you know, whatever shortcoming we attribute to the parents? I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And
Okay.
you know, and I should have thought we are civilized enough to welcome all children.
Okay. I just want to remind you that the panel is here to take your questions. You can submit them online in the Ask the Expert box below this screen, or if you'd rather call, we're toll-free 1-888-891-1195. Teresa, let's talk for a minute then about the stereotyping, the judgment, which we just got into a little bit about that. Do you feel that in your life?
I think I feel less of it now because people see that I am trying my hardest to draw my family out of poverty. But I'm just baffled by the fact that people think that the poor should have nothing. The poor should not have children. The poor should not be happy. The poor should not have food. They should not have anything. Why is that? Like, I'm human. I'm a human. I feel, I love. I'm a person, and just because my income doesn't match a certain level that society sees fit, I should have nothing. That is, it's heart-wrenching to know that people have to work so hard to get where they're going because of judgments and people who just don't want to see you for anything but being poor.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's awesome.
But and they're judged too. What I find just mind-boggling is the work. Like you say, they work so hard. And in the film, Frank and Jen have gone through more parenting courses. I mean, if only every parent had to go through what they go through, parenting courses and counseling and, you know, crisis anger management and all kinds of courses that Joe Public doesn't take and doesn't have to take, and the work that's put in, and they're still judged. You know, it's exhausting.
Peter?
I think the other thing is how the children experience the stigma. I think the film very well portrayed, you know, Isaiah in his eyes when he's in the yard and his parents are going to get him a birthday present. He thinks the next day he hasn't got a birthday party, he's going to the park. You can imagine he doesn't go to many birthday parties because his mom probably can't afford to buy a gift for him to take.
Right.
He can't take a lot of the sports he might be interested in taking, his father says, and his mom can't come to see him when he's gone to recreational swimming, right, because she can't afford a $10 taxi. How many middle-class people ever think about it's more their busy schedules than it is a $10 taxi ride that keeps them from going to see their son? So all of these things, I think a young kid, you know, it affects them.
Sure. Teresa, you said that you did live in poverty as an adolescent. Anyway, how did you feel as a kid?
After my father died, my mom, I think, she was devastated because she lost her life partner. I got to see exactly how much money we had because I used to go to the bank and pay the bills and pay the rent. So some responsibilities that wouldn't normally be placed on an adolescent and more of the freedom of being an adolescent weren't really in the realm of my life. My mother and I were left to take care of ourselves and each other, and it ended up being hard.
Yeah, okay. We have another email, this time from Ali in Ottawa. What's being done to raise awareness about child poverty in Canadian communities? Plenty of middle and upper class parents routinely tell their kids to eat their meals because kids are starving in Africa or other third world countries. Have we forgotten that kids sit next to our kids in class who have nothing to eat simply because their parents are low income? That's an interesting question. Are poor kids here invisible in some way?
I think they are. One reason is you see kids dress in a very similar fashion, and so when you see a schoolyard, you can't just pick out, you know, this is a poor kid and this is not a poor kid. Now, the awareness around food is really interesting because you know, I've done this exercise with my students in class, and I got them to put budgets together, and I said to them, develop a budget and work out how much money you think you know, single mother with one child, 2 children would require. And the students on average come up with at least double, if not 3 or 4 times as much. And they're totally shocked that when they find out how very little people on social assistance actually get.
Okay.
And I think the large majority of people haven't got a clue how what the social assistance rates are.
Right. Yeah. Why is that, Peter?
That's because they essentially don't understand how low the rates are, and they don't really actually think about what it costs to live on a monthly basis. If we actually have had 5,000 people fill an online survey called Do the Math, which actually asks them to make choices across from food to rent to household necessities to hygiene products, even recreation. What do you think, if you were really to be frugal over the course of a month, it would cost in each of these items? And the 5,000 people that have replied so far for doing this for a single adult actually have shown that their average is $1,550 a month. But a single adult in Ontario on social assistance gets $595 a month. So after they do this figure, and they actually are shown what a single adult gets on social assistance, what somebody gets on minimum wage, on unemployment insurance, they actually discover the gap between what people can get on these programs and what they need to live.
Okay, I need to stop you there for a minute. $595 a month for one person.
For a single adult.
In Toronto, let's say.
In Toronto, yeah. That's right.
Okay,
if you're disabled, it's $1,040, but if you're a single adult without a disability out of the workforce, it's $595.
So how do you split that? Explain to me how somebody lives on that. How would they actually do it?
They use the food bank as much as possible. They beg, borrow from friends as much as possible. They go into debt. You know, if they can manage to get a credit card, which frequently they can't, they don't eat.
Drop-ins.
Yeah, they go to community dining centers.
And they go hungry.
And they go hungry. They don't eat.
All right. Well, some of you may have seen the recent Toronto Star series on the use of food banks.
That's right.
For a week. They had several people, high-profile people in Toronto, eating from food banks for a week.
That's right.
They got weak,
Yeah.
dizzy, had to go to drop-in centers. One guy quit.
Yeah. None of them made, or one made it through the week by actually the counselor by actually going to food centers, but none of them could get past the 5th day on the 7-day food hamper they were given. I was at the event that they actually reported their results, and they admitted they had the privilege of knowing at the end of 7 days they were going to be back.
They could eat again.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
And how do people do this day after day,
Well,
week after week?
what does happen to people who have to live like that every day? What's the effect of that over time?
They get sick. There's more than enough research that shows actually that people have higher incidence of chronic disease. They use the hospital more frequently. They even have more severe mental health problems, like they're 10 times more likely person in social assistance to attempt suicide. Like we know this from a Poverty Makes Us Sick report that was recently released. So the fact is that people really, and when they get sick, they actually, one report has shown that it costs us $3 billion a year in Ontario for the health care costs related to these conditions that arise from poverty. So it costs us money.
All right, and Brigitte, we said this in the introduction, I think, but not everybody who is poor is on social assistance.
Well,
Is that a misperception that we have, that poverty is for people on social assistance when actually there are people working who are
I think it
fall
is
into that category?
I think it is a total misperception. And when you think about the fact that 40% of children are living in households where one parent is in full-time employment. And I think you see, we earlier on talked about the state of the economy. I think for me that is the strongest condemnation of the state of our economy, that so many people are working full-time and are not earning enough to support themselves and at least one or two children. Because to go back to the caller about the large number of children poor families have, in the whole of Canada, only 10% of families have 3 or more children. 10%.
Okay. We have another email here from Anne in Toronto. The cost of living in Toronto is very high and the middle class families are only a step away from poverty. Why doesn't the government control the rental costs that are increasing every year and are a heavy burden for many families? Is that the only issue, rent, or is that part of it?
Rent is certainly, when you're at low income, as Teresa talked about, when she gets subsidized housing, she's better able to use what little money she gets to be able to buy the other necessities of life. So rent is a big part of the problem, around which there's major organizing happening to try to get more affordable housing actually built, and to provide as well maybe a housing benefit to people. To part of the social program, not just for people on social assistance, but working poor people, could be a housing benefit to help them cover their rent costs. So both supply and income affordability are important for people in that regard.
Okay. Nance, in your film, the parents' biggest concern wasn't actually the money, which was surprising, I think, for some of us. It was about their children's opportunities. Were you surprised by that?
I think what happened is that there was a sort of a redefinition of wealth. In terms of, in my mind, and it sort of made it, my awareness level was risen considerably, because immediately you think, oh, they probably just want more money, or they want a bigger house. I asked Jen at one point, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? And you heard what Isaiah said, but Jen said, I would like my own piece of land to put my trailer on, so that the people around in the trailer park will stop judging her and yelling at her kids and calling the police when their garbage isn't all picked up and looks a little messy on the driveway. I think these are her dreams, are to have her kids educated and give them a future and to not be judged. It's pretty simple.
All right, and Isaiah is clearly a very bright boy.
Yeah.
I loved the way you were able to portray that in the film. How has his being poor affected his opportunities, do you think?
Well, they haven't affected his opportunities so far. I think they're in a school right now that is quite understanding. There is quite a few kids living below the poverty line in that school. So there are breakfast programs. There are a lot of attention paid to kids that may need a little extra time. He doesn't. He's at the top of his class. So right now, his opportunities aren't limited. It's just going to be when he gets out of grade 12, his opportunities will be nil, you know.
All right.
They just don't have the money.
Right. And what do you think his future holds for him?
Well, if I have anything to do with it, and I've raised quite a bit of money for him for a foundation. We've also had some wonderful news from some people at Appleby College who saw the film, who have encouraged Isaiah and Ethan to apply, and they will have sponsored families helping them. So there may be something going. He's very excited. He wants to go to university desperately. And so I'm still in his life and will be forever. So I'm going to do my best to help him.
All right. Teresa, how does being poor affect a child's opportunities? What do you know of that?
I can remember life at home being very stressful. That's the best I can say. It was just very stressful. It was very toxic. It was hard. I know my mom was suffering. It's different looking back now that I'm in my 30s, and know that my mom was doing the very best that she could with what she had. But I believe it affected my opportunity.
Sure.
I wouldn't be 34 years old in college if I wouldn't have had really messed up adolescence.
Right. And what are your concerns for your child?
I'm hoping that the concerns will be gone by then. I know that my son sees that I work hard every day, that I get up, we have good structure in our lives, we have good routine in our lives, and I hope with all my heart that I will be able to continue on this journey and he won't have to go through this.
All right. We have an email now from Garth Rennie in Windsor. What are successful initiatives in communities outside Canada that are helping to diminish poverty? Brigitte, Peter, I'm not sure who would like to answer this.
Well, usually people start talking about the Scandinavian model, but I would like to talk about the French model, because France is a country that had for most of the post-war period a conservative government. And lo and behold, the French have been able to put a child and family support system in place that equals the Scandinavian model. Actually, I think probably their early childhood education programs are even better than the ones in the Scandinavian countries. By the age of 3, over 90% of French children are in these écoles maternelles, the kindergarten for small children. And everybody goes there, rich and poor, and they go because the children are socialized, they're educated, and they learn to be together as young people. Because I think we sometimes in this individualistic society we have created, we forget that we actually are social beings, and that people like to be together, and children learn this at a young age, and then they come together later on. The French still have free education, free university education. They pay family allowances up to the age of 27 to allow the parents to support their adult children when they go to university. When I have been speaking publicly about this, people in Canada always said, "Oh, but higher education, is a luxury, is a privilege." In France, it's considered a necessity because the French know full well that they cannot compete with low-wage economy. So the way they will compete is by having a highly educated, knowledgeable workforce.
Right.
And so they are investing in their young people. They have a wonderful parental leave program
Yes.
that covers mothers with children under the age of 3. So you don't have to be on social assistance because you are on this parental leave program. They also have arrangements for parents to leave work earlier and
Good summer vacation plans.
yes,
Right.
and their holidays are much longer.
Yes.
I mean, I could
You
go
said-
on.
oh, there's so much there. Now,
Yeah.
why such a difference? I'll ask you that, Peter, from a system that's set up like that to ours.
I think the French recognize that in order to have this kind of collective benefit and for nobody left behind, that they have to pay a certain level of taxation in order to allow governments to be able to provide that kind of thing. There is a culture, it is less unequal in our society, and the closer actually we are to each other, the more we are likely to support each other. These are mostly universal type programs that actually help us recognize we have a shared stake in a healthy community. And there are some examples here in Canada of provincial governments at least taking some initiatives. Newfoundland and Labrador cut its child poverty numbers from 22,000 to 11,000 over a 5-year period by doing things like increasing the minimum wage, improving social assistance, and creating more subsidized early child care spaces, which is very important for moms if they're going to be able to work and support themselves. Similarly, in Quebec, they had major impact on their child poverty numbers through things like child care programs and improving and indexing benefits that people get when they get some social assistance payments or other payments. So we don't have as comprehensive approach at the provincial level in many cases, but there is real evidence, even in Canada, in our provincial jurisdictions, that we can do that. And this provincial government has made a commitment to reducing poverty by 90,000 over 5 years and has implemented the Ontario Child Benefit, accelerated it, and increased the minimum wage.
So that means parents will be getting more money for each child. Is that what you mean by accelerated?
Depending on their level of income, they actually I think they're going up to $1,310. They're at $1,100 now. I think it is for the province. And they, instead of delaying that over 4 or 5 years, they started to accelerate the payments in the last year. Is that correct?
It went up to. It was supposed to happen gradually over 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the real kicker in all of this is, even when they stopped the National Child Tax Benefit Supplement, when that started, they started clawing back the money, and then they stopped. They said, "We're going to stop the clawback. We're going to stop the clawback." But what they really did was they stopped the clawback and clawed back our personal needs allowance.
Oh, okay.
So literally, there were families only coming out $3 ahead.
Right.
When the general public was believing that the poorest people in our communities were getting the assistance that they needed.
Okay. In Ontario, we also have full-day kindergarten coming.
Starting
to send some. Is that is that going to address? It sounds similar to what you were talking about, Brigitte, in France, where you're starting kids off a little bit early. Is that going to make any dent in this at all?
Well, it's going to be implemented over the next 3 years and starting in the poorest neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it'll be an aid and a support to families and parents in those neighborhoods. It would be a $1.5 billion investment over 3 years for this government. So it is part of their package. And as Teresa says, people on social assistance really don't benefit from the Ontario Child Benefit. Working poor people don't have the clawback, so that they do get the fuller benefits. It's a bit problematic to another major issue that happened in our budget is that we essentially have eliminated or about to cut the special diet allowance, which actually goes to 160,000 people, including kids and families.
Right.
And that's a $200 million program that might come down to certainly in 10 or 12 or 13 million, but it's not going to be 200 million. And that's, I know a parent I met last week who's going to have her family income reduced by about $600 a month because of the amount she was getting on special diet.
Okay.
You got to have a comprehensive, consistent, overall coherent plan like they do in France, as opposed to a piecemeal programmatic thing where you give it
That's
here
a
and you
national
take it away.
program.
Yeah.
And we're
Well, provincial jurisdictions, we can do certain things at the provincial level. There's no question.
Yeah.
We can't fully attack poverty, child poverty, or any poverty without the federal government being
all
involved.
right.
But Teresa made a really good point,
Yes.
because when she said that, so they give with one hand and then
take
they
with
take
the other.
and you see, that just doesn't make sense.
Okay. We have an email here from Sarah in Perth. If the government increased the amount of social assistance, welfare, ODSP, to a reasonable level, would this not encourage more people to go on assistance instead of working? I'm on ODSP, so I am not judging anyone. And maybe somebody can tell us what ODSP is.
Ontario Disability Support Program. People who have a disability and can't participate in the workforce fully do get a little bit higher benefit than people on what's called Ontario Works.
Okay, so when people are on social assistance, does that mean they don't ever want to go back to work? I mean, that's what the question is.
Well, essentially, if you make the choice that you want to live on $595 a month or below the poverty line, right now the highest social assistance rates, even for families with, couples with 2 kids, is still like 7,000 or 8,000 below our unofficial poverty line, the LICO rates, what it actually costs, and it's about $15,000 below what the average income is for families of the same size. Like, if you are people do not really condemn themselves to poverty forever by taking as much as possible whenever there are employment programs that try to help people get out of welfare. People subscribe, like they go to school, they go into debt, like Teresa has done, like $30,000 debt in order to improve her situation so she can support herself and her family better. These are the choices that people are making. That is not a choice to stay hungry and stay poorly housed and stay in poor health conditions at the rates that we get on social assistance, even ODSP.
When we had the Liberal government of David Peterson, we had a study on social assistance called Transitions, and it's a big fat report with over 1,000 pages. And they also looked at the length of time people stayed on social assistance. And the majority of people on social assistance are off within 6 months. And on average in Ontario, they stayed for 2 years, and then it got it increased to 5 years. But that was because we went into a recession. So the fact that within 6 months the majority of people are off social assistance is a clear indication that most people. I mean, I wouldn't say that nobody would decide to live on social assistance, but I don't think anybody really wants to do that. And I don't know where this perception comes from in the public, that, this idea that you can live the life of Riley on social assistance, I mean, it's just, totally bizarre.
Oh, and that everybody on social assistance frauds the government, when really, when studies are done, it's only like 1% or something like that. And most overpayments that happen, or most overpayments that are incurred, are due to administration errors, not because somebody is frauding the system.
Okay.
I think it should be a bigger concern with the wealthy is frauding the system. I mean, no one talks about that. No one judges the wealthy as much as people are judged. Who would want to be on welfare with the judgment that comes down on you for being on it?
All right. We mentioned also in the introduction that the statistics are particularly alarming for Aboriginal kids in this country. 1 in 4, and under the age of 6, it's pretty much half of all kids are living in poverty. Why? Why are those numbers so high? Peter?
Well, I just think that historically, we have just not fairly treated and included our Aboriginal population. So people living even in urban around reserves, like we're talking about people actually living in third world conditions when they don't have adequate drinking water, as we've seen in Northern Ontario, right? Like we're actually talking about the level of poverty and depth of poverty that is unimaginable in North America, and which is more comparable sometimes to what's going on in other countries. And I just don't think we've adequately addressed treaty rights for one thing. There's a certain asset base that the Aboriginal people can adequately claim and maybe bargain for and help improve their own situation, and there's a lot of treaty rights that aren't recognized around what their real wealth is.
Okay. We did have a government resolution that poverty would be eliminated by the year 2000. It didn't work. What do you think it's going to take, Brigitte, to eliminate family and child poverty?
Well, I think it has to come from us, the people, from the electorate. I think you know, somehow you know, we have to come together as a people and decide that we value every child that is born into our community. It's a question of human rights. You see, there was another declaration in 1989, and that was the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which actually Brian Mulroney, who was our Prime Minister at the time, was the honorary chair of this convention. And the resolution was that children have the first claim on their country's resources. And Canada signed. And we have broken that UN resolution over and over again. And I think, you see, what needs to happen, you know, we need, you know, organizations like Campaign 2000 and, you know, other people can join more and more community organizations, and there has to be put pressure on governments to honor the commitments they have already made. And these are commitments that the world community has agreed to. 134 nations signed the Convention on the Right of the Child.
Okay. Nance, let me ask you that. What do you think it will take? Big question, I know, but to reduce child and family poverty?
Well, aside from free secondary education, I think that would be a big one. I also think this sense of community, and Brigitte talked about it, but this sense that, just to put it back down to Isaiah's family again, that instead of making a phone call and calling a policeman because you see children running around and riding their little big wheel without a helmet on, perhaps, you know, you could step out your door and offer to help, you know, when you see a single mother running around chasing after 4 kids. I think there is a lack of community. There's a lack of community responsibility. There's a lack of empathy, and there's a lack of desire to eliminate the margins. A lot of people ask me, you know, what's it like doing documentary films about people in the margins? And I'm like, whose margin are we talking about? You know, my margin is different than your margin, is different than Jen and Frank's margin. I eliminate those margins and just and be a part of a bigger community that actually cares.
Okay, that's a very good way to put it. Teresa, what do you think it's going to take?
In order to eliminate child poverty, you have to eliminate adult poverty. And I know it's always nice that we sit and we talk about child poverty, but parents are living in poverty, and that's why children are living in poverty, and this is how this cycle continues. Some of the ideas I have are definitely more affordable housing. I know what a difference it made in my life from paying market rent to having affordable housing. Universal childcare, universal education. And I agree with what Nance says. More sense of community. If we all cared about our neighbors, we wouldn't allow it to happen in front of us. We wouldn't turn our head and say, oh, it's okay for my neighbor to live like this.
All right. Peter, what are the consequences if we do not do some of these things and reduce the numbers?
We'll become a more divided society and community, and we're going to become less healthy overall, not just the people at the bottom, but overall, as the research shows, the more unequal your society is, the less well it does economically, the less well it does socially, and the less well it does in terms of its overall health across all classes, believe it or not. So in fact, it's a shared stake we have in getting closer together in terms of how we share the resources we have in this society than in allowing us to get further and further apart.
Okay, thank you everybody for this discussion. Nance, thank you so much for your film. and got us talking tonight about this important topic, and thank you all of you for coming in tonight to help us with it. My guests have been Peter Clutterbuck, Teresa Schrader, Brigitte Kitchen, and Nance Ackerman. You'll find Nance's film 4 Feet Up along with tonight's discussion and other resources online at tvo.org. Thanks for participating in this special event. I'm Cheryl Jackson. Good night.